hopefully in your own groups outside of this webinar that you can go on and discuss. We in MSLETB are trying to break some ground at the moment in bringing women's wellness to the forefront within our organisation. I'm working with MSLETB a year now. My name is Orla Sweeney, by the way, for people who have just joined us, and I work as the Skills to Advance Employer Engagement Officer. I love my job. I get to talk a lot and I get to meet a lot of people, and we get to create an awful lot. And that's what really, really excites and thrills me. But one of the things I noticed when I came on board in this organisation, I'm based in Sligo now after 20 something years in Dublin, but I was blown away by the amount of women in my organisation and the amount of women that were just the most solid, the solid backbone of a huge organization of over 2,000 employees. These are the people that are steering everything, that are keeping everything running every single day to provide education and training across the board throughout three counties in Sligo, Mayo and Leitrim. And I'm constantly learning from these women, and I'm so lucky to have the wonderful Michelle Gillen on my team, Sarah Rooney, and Siobhan Magner, who I'm going to introduce to you next as one of our first guests of the day. And I will be bringing our other guests on board as the morning goes on. We will be taking Q&A at the end, so feel free to send in any questions that you may have to ourselves, and we'll give everybody their due time then as well. So for everybody that's made it, we had some technical issues this morning, but we worked together as women do. We multitasked, we got there, and we have the show live online. And I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague Siobhan Magner, my colleague Louise Dennison, and who was actually somebody I engaged with in a previous life within the Irish language, the wonderful Síle Seoige, who's Beolin Armaghan as well. And I'll come back to the other ladies in a bit. But firstly, Siobhan was actually the first person I met face to face in the organisation, and Siobhan was one of the people that interviewed me for my current role. And I got questioned quite a bit by Siobhan, but I thoroughly enjoyed it, I have to say. She's a very, very good interviewer. And I was lucky to get the role and engage constantly and consistently since then. Siobhan is a very experienced, educated and education manager within MSLETB, working with such a diverse range of programmes throughout the company, specialising in apprenticeships, providing interactive learning experiences, diverse learning styles, and is one of our great leaders also on the management team. Siobhan's current role oversees the strategic operational aspects of the MSLETB and its new apprenticeships, and what a job Siobhan is doing. Like, Siobhan, I get to work with you and I thoroughly enjoy it. And I ring you with mad ideas and you champion them and you say, yes, that's great, but we might go this way and we might go that way. And I'm constantly learning from you, as I know other people are. And you're a natural in your role in terms of bringing people together, keeping them enthused and involving them. You're a connector. You're a connector amongst us all, which is a wonderful thing to have, because certainly for me and for other people coming into an organisation, that's so huge. You could get lost in it very, very quickly. And if we don't have the connectors within an organisation such as yourself, it can be a hard place to be. Well, I'm very grateful for having you and for being involved. But will you start off maybe by telling us, Siobhan, how did your interest in education come about? Because getting some of your background the other day from you, you worked as a nurse in Italy. You worked educating the masses in Pakistan. I was like, oh my God, why does this surprise me? But it doesn't surprise me, because you're well travelled, you're well educated, and you're well able.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Orla. And hello, good morning, everybody. Yes, I'm working in MSLETB since 2019. Going back, I suppose, originally where I started, I always wanted to be a teacher. I didn't get the B in Irish then, unfortunately, so I didn't get into teacher training college. So my mum and dad at the time, they said, look, try nursing. My mum is a nurse, so try nursing. So off I went anyway, up to Vincent's in Ellen Park, and graduated as a nurse and had a great experience, loved the whole working experience of nursing. And actually that was my first, I suppose, you know, the first time I had an apprenticeship, experience with apprenticeships, because at the time nursing was an apprenticeship. We spent 9 months in the hospital as such, and then 3 months in the college side of things. So I went through my nursing, qualified as a nurse, went off to Italy originally for 6 months, stayed for 3 years, moved back over to London, nursed for 2 years, and then I was delighted to win a scholarship with the Irish Press newspaper at the time to go to college, go back to college. So my fees were paid to do my degree in marketing. So went through really happy 3 years in college. I was back as a mature student, so always loved the learning. After that, for some reason, I went off over to South Africa and I got a job in a hotel for 9 months. But then the college where I studied asked me to go to Pakistan teaching, and I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. So went off over to Pakistan, stayed there for 9 months, had to come back due to some of the troubles over there. And that's where I started my lecturing then, was in the college in Dublin Business School. And I was there for 18 years until 2017. And I moved over to the further education and training sector, went into Education Training Boards Ireland and NACE there, and that was my first real, I suppose, introduction to the whole area of apprenticeships. Definitely the best decision of my life from a career perspective. Stayed with them 2 years and then moved to MSLETB. And at the time I came in as I was managing the sales apprenticeship. And since then, you know, I've been involved with quite a lot of the developments of apprenticeships across Ireland with the education training boards. But I think I've found my home now in MSL. I really love the job that I work in. I love to be able to afford, you know, young students the opportunity to come on board, to join apprenticeship programs, you know, to work towards getting their qualification. And I see the value. I'm a great believer in apprenticeships as an educational model. I see the value it brings to industry. I see the value it brings to the personal development of the apprentice themselves. And I'm one of these people, I suppose, that love my job. You know, I work with a phenomenal amount of wonderful people in MSLETB, from from senior management down to my colleagues that I work with on the different apprenticeship programs, Jessica, Julie, all the team. They're superb. And as well as that, I wouldn't be able to do my job without all the support team around me as well. So I'm very lucky where I am at the moment.
And support is key as well when you're constantly
Yeah.
developing, and you know you're pulled asunder really, Siobhan, and I know you are within your role as well. So you are looking to your team and working as a unit
Yeah.
all of the time as well, which allows other people to follow on and create in your footsteps also. What are the difficulties that you would face? Like, I know that at the moment we're working on new accreditations and things take time, and there's a lot of work that goes into just, you know, getting one thing past the goalpost. But what are the major difficulties that you would face in your work on a day-to-day basis?
I suppose every day is different. You know, you might have employers ring you looking to find out information about different apprenticeships. You have, you know, some of your colleagues might have questions to be asked. You know, everything is very new, so you have to be on top of the game all of the time. You then have to balance that with your home life. Like, the kids are home from school at 3:30. They don't care whether mom is working or not. They want to be fed. They want to be entertained. You know, we're very lucky to have au pairs with us here to look after the kids. But it's all of that balance. I'm lucky that I love my job. And I think the day that I don't like my job would be the day I'd leave. You know, but I really love it. And I think working with the team around you, that makes your job much easier. When you've got really dedicated people around you, both male and female and
Yeah.
male people, you know, that makes all the difference. But sometimes the people in the background that do all the work in the background aren't recognized. You know, we don't see them, you know, very often. They're not out in the forefront. And like, there's a lot of ladies and men in the background that really make my job very easy. And you know, it's that. And the challenges, one of the things I love is coming up with new ideas for programs, you know. So when you come to me with ideas for the skills to advance courses, when employers come to me saying, you know, Siobhan, is there an apprenticeship in this? These are the things that I love, you know, because I'm able to think, I like to think strategically, and I like to think, well, what an opportunity this would be to have a student. And I think of my own daughter, wouldn't I love my daughter to be coming on to the sales apprenticeship? Or, we've just submitted a digital marketing apprenticeship now into QQI for validation. I'd love my daughter to do that. It's the skills, the knowledge, the competencies that they pick up over the few years while they're working on the job, but also doing the college bit, So
And that's a really good point, Siobhan. And actually, we've discussed this a few times. The difference nowadays, like, I mean, I did my Leaving Cert 20 something years ago, and it was like you did your leave and you went to college or you didn't. So there was no other routes, or I think that the PLC courses were just coming about at that time. And we had no foresight into where we could go, because if you didn't go to college, where were you going to end up? You weren't going to get the good job that you needed or get into the government services and stuff like that. But now education is so vast, so diverse, that there's so much on offer out there that, the point system should not have the same emphasis as it unfortunately still does have. And also that we're so much more aware of the diverse range of learners that we're dealing with. And that's from businesses to school leavers. Like, so I know we both know at the moment, like, we're working on how do we kind of introduce this into more of our programs, etc. But also within our teams, like, we're all working with neurodiverse colleagues and people that are facing so many challenges outside of work. And as a manager, Siobhan, and somebody who's also juggling those challenges, I mean, some days I honestly think my work starts when I get in at 6 o'clock with a tired child, and people hanging out of you and a house to be cleaned, and like, you're like, this is actually harder than going to work some days. Like, but like, how do you find balancing all that, and how would you encourage young women and men to look forward that maybe aren't finding their way in the second level system, as so many aren't? What would you say to them about balancing life, or maybe women coming back to education? How would they balance? Like, we would get a lot of people that we'd meet that may say, I can't do that course now, my life is too busy, I have too much going on. And why wouldn't you do that course? And why can't you put your time aside? So it's applicable to all of us. So the young people coming forward and the people who are trying to jump back into education, what would be your advice to them?
Well, I think when you're talking about the young people there, I've many young people coming to me now, like kids, my friends' children, for example. My friends would come and say, Siobhan, Johnny hasn't a clue what to do. And I'd meet all these people. And it's not, I'd meet many kids, I suppose, at events and everything. And, when they'd say, Siobhan, I'd have no idea what to do, I'd always say, well, what's the wish list? What's the big dream, first of all? And it's when they say that you can say, you can guide them towards pathways that they mightn't have ever heard of, traineeships. They mightn't have ever heard of apprenticeships. There's still that air of that apprenticeships, a lot of people don't realize there's 73 apprenticeships available in Ireland at the moment.
It's unbelievable. Yeah.
And they range from level 5 all the way up to PhD level at level 10. When I say that out to groups of employers, parents, kids, they're completely unaware of that. So we're very lucky in Ireland that we have 73, and by the end of this year we're going to have over 100 apprenticeships developed, which is a phenomenal opportunity for anybody. And even the older people that are looking to come back to work, they might be changing careers. We've got people up to the age, we've a 57-year-old on our sales apprenticeship, for example. So our apprentices range from 18 to 57. So there's no upper age limit. For anybody looking to come back to do a course, we're really like one of the big things. When I joined the further education training sector, I was absolutely blown away by, first of all, the number of courses that you could do through ETBs, but second of all, the commitment and the resources on offer, the commitment of the staff. Like, you've never seen staff members so committed to their learners. The amount of resources available, you mentioned there, neurodiverse students. We've got fabulous people in MSLETB who can assess people for dyslexia, for example. And once those assessments are made, we can offer all of these resources to make the learning experience really positive for anybody coming onto our programs. And that to me is phenomenal, that you can afford them the opportunity to come back.
It is phenomenal. And I guess, Siobhan, I would see that in a certain age dynamic when I am out with employers and chatting to employees. Like you mentioned, a 57-year-old lady who's on one of the apprenticeships. But people didn't get a chance back then to be catered for within schools, because nobody had dyslexia when I was going to school. Nobody knew anything about it. Nobody knew anything about neurodiversity. But these are the people that are running the country now and
Yeah,
that are in
yeah,
employment across the board. But having a lack of knowledge and education in those areas back then, I suppose it would have cut a lot of people's confidence in terms of their own ability.
yeah.
So with True Skills to Advance, we would be encouraging people to, partake in upskilling and climb the ladder and move yourself on. There's nothing stopping you. Within apprenticeships, you're obviously putting procedures in place for that as well. How do you recruit for your apprenticeship, Siobhan? How do you bring people on board with you?
Okay, well, for our own, we're the coordinating provider for the sales apprenticeship, the craft butchery apprenticeship, and hopefully in a couple of months, the new digital marketing and media apprenticeship. We would spend a lot of time with our employers, getting them, to come on board, we do quite a lot of briefings. Jessica Martin, Julie Cahill, our two program managers, would be out on the road quite a lot, briefing employers about the value of apprenticeships. On the other side, then we would go into schools, we'd go to events like Higher Options, the School Summit. We always have people, we've a couple of colleagues up in Dublin today at a tech summit. And this is where we would recruit the students to come on board, We've also, there was a situation where I was speaking to a manager in a company about the sales apprenticeship a few years back, and she wanted two of her employees to come on board. And at the end of the conversation, she said, "God, Siobhan, can I come on and do that program myself?" So she came on board. I'm not too sure how the two students thought, how good it would be having the employer on board as well. But it's that, it's all about going out and communicating and, making people aware of the value of apprenticeships as an educational route. And
And
one of the things actually, just in terms of these apprenticeships, when we're designing these programs, we also ensure that there's a progression pathway for our graduates into higher education, which is great. So we'd spend quite a lot of time talking to colleagues in colleges in higher ed, to make sure that, they see our apprentices as coming out with having 2 years work experience in a particular area, and not just a certificate saying they have a advanced certificate in sales, and that they're bringing quite a lot of experience with them as well, which is great.
yeah, that's incredible. And a question I had for you, Siobhan, that from my past days as a secondary school teacher, parents had this notion that apprenticeships, weren't for their Johnny or Mary, because they weren't at the level that they would require as parents for their children if it wasn't Trinity or UCD. Do you still encounter that kind of bias against apprenticeships?
Some people now, the tide is turning, I have to say, and in fairness to Minister Simon Harris, he's done Trojan work over the last while, as has had the National Apprenticeship Office. You know, I suppose I have to think of a very funny story of my mum when I was leaving Dublin Business School at the time. Mum was saying, "Why are you going into the whole world of apprenticeships? Apprenticeships, are they any good? But if you're to see my mum talking about apprenticeships now, she's texting me, "Siobhan, Simon Harris is on the news, or such and such is on the news about apprenticeships." So if I can convince my mum, there's there's no problem convincing other people. But yes, there still is a mindset, but I have to say, with the amount of work that people are doing in the country at the moment, that and even now, even this morning, I had a text message from somebody asking about where do I go to look for such and such an apprenticeship. So a lot of the parents are definitely seeing more and more out and about and in media about apprenticeships, and it's some of the parents are coming to ask us to speak at parent events or at school events, etc. So the tide is turning. I think there's still a good bit of work to do, but in fairness, even from when we started off the whole new apprenticeship, that mode back in 2016-17, we've come on hugely over those last few years, and it's a great space to be in. It's a brilliant space to work in.
I often, because I'm based in the training centre in Sligo, where there's a fantastic apprenticeship office and support network between all the team, but I often hear so many people from that team talking about the amount of time that they spend engaging with parents on the phone. And I said, you're like a counselling service. You're actually like, how is this provided as well? But there's huge support for parents. So I guess not only with your child going off to whatever college they're going to, but also going on apprenticeship courses, like it's the same deal. They're away from home for long periods of
Absolutely,
time.
yeah.
And could you tell us a little bit about the support structures that are in place for any parent watching that might be a little bit nervous about their own heading off into
Yeah.
the wilderness?
Well, certainly, coming on to an apprenticeship program, first and foremost, you're coming on as an employee. So you are employed by an organization. So you've all of the supports there. With an apprenticeship, each apprentice is allocated a workplace mentor in the workplace themselves. They have to complete some training with us before they take on the role. They have to there's certain criteria that they have to achieve before they can actually be nominated as the workplace mentor. So they have all of that support in the workplace. They have the usual induction in the workplace. They work with colleagues. A lot of the companies that we deal with would allocate buddy systems, etc. And I'll speak about an MSLETB perspective. Then we have a brilliant academic lead, Brendan Garrity, and Martin in our craft butchery, Brendan in our sales. So they have the full support of those two guys. But as well as that, our instructors are phenomenal. They go over and above all of the time. So the student or the apprentices know that there is quite a lot of support available. We have a very good structured induction program. They know as well that the guidance counsellors, we have fantastic guidance counsellors in MSLETB. One of Barbara comes on board for the sales apprenticeship, for example, and gives a great learning to learn program, and it's really targeting those people that are coming back from changing careers, maybe coming back into the college environment after maybe never going to college, or maybe been out of college for a while, or just coming from school into it. So she does a fantastic workshop, and the guidance counsellors are there always for the apprentices if they need anything. So in terms of the support, there's so many supports on offer for them. And I think sometimes there's nearly more support for the apprentices rather, other than students going into a normal college, because they are in the work environment for anything up to 80% of the time. So they've got the support of their colleagues. And then of course you've got the classes, they all support each other. So there's WhatsApp groups, and you know what's going on through WhatsApp groups, but they are a great support to each other as well.
There's great crack amongst the apprentices and the tutors. Like I get to witness that on a daily basis, and there's a warmth to them. And it's even with the tutors that I see up and down the hallways every day, like they're looking after them. They're really looking after them. So they're not just their teachers, but they are their support structures in place as well. So that there's a very friendly environment that surrounds apprenticeships, and there is lovely relationships between the tutors. And that struck me when I began working with MSLETB. I was like, God, any young person coming in here, from the hairdressing section down to electrical instrumentation, like we have a wealth of the most incredible tutors available to these young people, very experienced in their own fields and very experienced educators as well. And like I would encourage anybody to go for it. Also, you mentioned they're employed coming out the door of school as well, Siobhan, and that's absolutely massive. And massive when we're living in a climate where, a lot of parents are struggling to pay for university fees, pay for accommodation, but not alone are they learning a skill, they're developing their career, but they're also earning as well. So the financial restraints are kind of taken away a little bit from families, do you think, or is there still a massive cost to it?
No, when they come on board as an apprentice, they're, as I said, they're first and foremost an employee, so they are getting a wage. So if you look at some of our apprentices, they could be starting off, coming out of Leaving Cert, starting off on 22, 23 grand in first year, and they don't have any college fees. A lot of our classes, if you look at our sales apprenticeship, a lot of our classes are online, so they can attend classes from the comfort of their home. They're in college face-to-face classes a couple of times every couple of months, So any of the resources we use, textbooks, we have a great ETBI digital library resource there. So any of these books, resources they need are all online. with our craft butchery apprenticeship program, everybody that comes in is given the laptop, you know, so they can do their studies with this laptop, you know. So it's those kind of resources that are available that, yes, it does take the financial aspect away a little bit. They don't come out with debt at the other side.
And I guess that connects in also, and something that MSL ETB and other ETBs don't get their deserved kudos for is the financial supports that are in place for learners.
Absolutely, yeah.
Through the ETBs are absolutely incredible. And certainly within MSL ETB, Siobhan, when we find that we did, like if an employer comes to us and we don't have that course available for them, or we haven't created that course yet, we're in such a fortunate position that we can go off and do that and provide the financial supports for further training within businesses and for young people coming up the ladder as well. And again, I suppose we're dealing a lot with a huge amount of vulnerability between a younger age cohort and an older age cohort that are looking to do the same thing as the apprentices are doing, but a little nervous about delving into the world. But at the end of the day, it's getting them to where they need to be. And we're very, very fortunate. Siobhan, like we could chat all day, but I would love to hear from you about your inspirations in education and who are the people that stood out to you on your journey. I know the people that champion you from within our own organisation, but who championed you along the way and kept you growing and kept you motivated?
I suppose going back to my school days, we had a teacher called Rita Murphy for biology. She used to terrify us all because she had us all standing up presenting. But I remember looking at her when I was leaving saying, God, she was a great teacher. You know, she by getting us to do things rather than just standing up and talking, she was a great inspiration. When it came to my nursing, there was the ward sister at the time of the coroner care unit used to terrify. As student nurses, we were terrified. And on Mondays, I can't remember her name, but on Mondays she'd collar a student nurse and she'd say, right, by Friday you have to do X, Y, and Z and present back to everybody in the ward. And like that was a great way of learning because we didn't have Google and all the chat GPTs and everything at the time, you know, so we actually had to go look at books. And even looking back now, that's one of the ways we teach at the moment. We get students to go out, do a little bit of research and come back in and present to classes. So even back 35 years ago, you know, that was a great form of learning. You know, now I suppose if I was to look at people that inspire me now, the wonderful Marie Gould, who gave me the opportunity to come into further education. She interviewed me many years ago, back in 2017. She's with QQI now, a phenomenal woman, and I'll always be grateful to her. I suppose looking to QQI and because I work in the area of QA, Naomi Jackson is fabulous. You know, but then all the people I work with as well, you know, there's, you know, Jessica, Julie, yourself, Sarah, you know, and all of these in the background. You've Dolores in literacy, you've Patricia in procurement, 18. Like there's so many people that help me along my way. And, you know, they all inspire me greatly because of the work they do. And they all, you know, make my job an awful lot easier, I can tell you. So look, there's quite a lot of people that do inspire me, but those are the people that would stand out, I suppose, over my education over the last number of years.
And I guess we're always meeting people who will inspire us as well.
Oh, absolutely. And even look, Louise, I've attended some of Louise is up next, and I've attended some of her sessions before, and she's great. And look, you all know Sheila from being, you know, her podcasts and her online, and she's inspirational to listen to. And unfortunately Denise Quirk couldn't make it this morning, but she's such an amazing story, you know, her story with Sugar Plum Sweetery and with Wholesome Kitchen, and I'm really sorry she couldn't make it, but she's a phenomenal inspiration when it comes to entrepreneurship and that entrepreneurial mind, and has went through so many challenges but plowed on and got her businesses up and running. But so yes, so that's.
And I think that's key, isn't it, really, Siobhan? And certainly in what we do, like we face challenges every single day, but we have to plow on. We have to plow on. And we're also responsible for so many other people that we continue to encourage them, and
Yeah.
we continue to encourage them to plough on in whatever their chosen path
Yeah.
is. And we have been gifted that responsibility, I suppose, within our jobs.
Yeah.
And yes, as you said, I'm also deeply, deeply grateful to the people who I work with, also who are mentoring me on a daily basis within Skills to Advance and beyond. And very, very delighted to work with your good self, Siobhan. And we bring you
And I
back
think as
in
well,
a little bit later.
it's the work ethic that was instilled as well from very early on. My parents would have, I was out working minding kids at 15,
Yeah.
for £2, I think, at the time. But my parents really instilled that work ethic into me. So I was quite lucky with all of that. And again, it's the same. I love working with people that have a strong work ethic and don't mind pulling up the sleeves and working hard. And I'm very, very lucky to work with all of those here in MSL.
Yeah, and again, a big shout out to our colleague Shannon, who pulled us all out of muddy water
Oh,
there this
she's
morning
fantastic at
with
20 to 10
technology.
when,
Listen, she's
yeah,
unbelievable, and we'd be lost on
she's
a daily basis
a
without her.
powerhouse
She's
of a
she's a
woman. Yeah.
powerhouse, and certainly my go-to. With that in mind, and thank you so much, Siobhan, and I'll be coming back to you in a little while. Speaking of people who inspire us within MSLE TV, I have got to put my lava suit and say this is one of my inspirations over the last year. I only met our next guest, Louise Dennison O'Shaughnessy from the Dennison Training Academy. Louise is the founder and CEO of this wonderful academy, and my old boss, Sean, asked me to connect with Louise when I took this role on board. And I said, Grant, I will. And sure, we might do a webinar together. But since then, so much has grown. Louise is a well-being in the workplace expert. She is one of our incredible tutors in MSLETB. She's a thought leader, a consultant, a trainer, a speaker, mental health advocate, like an author, so much. And you know what? She's great crack as well. And I love when we have meetings together because we never leave them without a smile. And we're blessed that we get to go out and work together. But within my role in Skills to Advance in MSLETB, I have seen such a demand for what Louise does. I don't know why my eyes weren't open to it as much before, but my goodness, they really, really are now. I'm very fortunate that I get to work with a very, very diverse mixed group of employers and employees across the counties. But this is something that if it's not in place in your company or within yourself, if your mental health isn't checked, then nothing else is going to work within your agency. And that is what Louise has taught me in the last year. And she's certainly inspired so many of our learners. I have learned so much from herself, her colleague Trudy, who we did a previous webinar on, and I'm championing women in peri and menopause in our organisation and beyond. And I'm learning so much about all these topics that are just fundamental to our daily existence, to be honest with you. So with that in mind, Louise, once again, I'd love to give you a lovely warm welcome on behalf of MSLETB to today's International Women's Day webinar.
Thank you so much. And thank you for such lovely words. I really, really appreciate it. And I love the fact that you included, we always have a laugh, because I don't think we've ever had a conversation without one. And I think it's so important to our mental health to laugh and not take ourselves too seriously sometimes as well, because especially with what I teach and cover, because it is such a serious kind of subject. So I suppose just to mention, like, we're here today to talk about our story, and the slides won't move on, of course. Why won't that work? Bear with me one second.
Sure, why would anything work? Why would anything
there we go. There. Oh, so we see I told you at the beginning. I told you at the beginning, when it's me in tech, that something always happens. So the reason I suppose I have a really pretty picture of a meandering river is because that's a bit like my background, my career. And I originally studied chemistry, a chemistry-based degree, and was like a pharmaceutical analyst. Did like a raw material analysis with a pharmaceutical company. Got involved in the wider organization stuff, environmental side of things, and kind of different team kind of building stuff as well. Worked there for a few years, went back, got itchy feet, went back and studied business. Did a postgrad in business, and I then was involved in setting up a company from kind of business plan to launch. Now, talk about deep end and learning as I go and going, yeah, no problem at all. I'm thinking, oh, I don't even know how to do this. But you know what, I like the challenge. So did it, and it turned out well, thankfully. Moved to Cork, the Rebel County, for 12 years, and was a mummy for a few years at home, and married to a fabulous workaholic. So again, was full-time at home for a few years, and then the itch came back to work and study. So I got my training and development qualification. I also got a medic qualification, so I did some short-lived kind of frontline work and event medic work, but realized very quickly it wasn't conducive to being a parent of young children. As much as I liked it, and I don't admit this very often, but also the back of an ambulance made me throw up. I used to get sick, and they used to have to pull over the ambulance, not for the patient, for me, and I'd be puking out the side of the road. So at the crack, the slagging I used to get was just they used to record me actually sometimes, and it used to go around in groups. Here she goes again. So realized that wasn't really the right kind of area for me. I always knew it was people and supporting and helping, but wasn't quite sure. I wasn't one of those people like my other half, for example, that always knew exactly where I wanted to go, which is why after listening to Siobhan there, like I've just got a massive education, more education on what MSLE-TB do. And I have to say, I am your biggest salesperson, unpaid salesperson for MSLE-TB out there, because I'm so impressed. I'm so impressed as a person about what is available to people. Like 99% of people have no idea what's out there. 99% of companies have no idea what's out there. And I just think it's really, really interesting to learn, what is available. Went then and started in the training world, started teaching kind of regular first aid and stuff like that. I was qualified to do it, started to really enjoy it. Was working all over, and then I went back again and studied how to be kind of an advanced mental health instructor. So took the kind of longer course option, which I wanted to, because I wanted to understand it. I wanted to understand the history, the culture, the beliefs, being different nationalities, what happened historically, what happened, and it was such an education. And also when I suppose I set up the company, my one thing was I wanted to reduce stigma through education. There is so much mental health stigma out there. When you ask, every time I run a course, I say to people, when you think of physical health, do you think something positive or negative? And they usually say positive. And when I ask about mental health, they usually say negative. But mental health and physical health are positive things. They're being well in your physical or mental state. So it's just interesting that, there are certain environments where you're not even able to use the word mental because there's such stigma associated with the word. So that was the whole basis of the company when I started it 5 years ago. And I currently am on a mission. I'm reaching for the stars, or I've told you this many times, I'm like a 12-year-old and I don't mind admitting it. I'm reaching for the stars and I'm seeing what happens. And what I mean by that is I want to go and work with as many people as possible to reduce the stigma when it comes to mental health. Whether it's talks, courses, you name it. Like, I'm very lucky that we get to offer the accredited courses here in Ireland through an international accreditation body, because there isn't currently one in Ireland yet. But because of that, we get to work with some amazing organisations like MSLE-TB. And I get to meet people from every walk of life, and you learn so much with people. We all look at the world through our own filtered lens. We all have our perception of the world, and everyone's is different. So saying to someone, I know how you feel, is actually a statement that we shouldn't really use, because we don't. We're not in that person's head. We're not coming from where they're coming from. We didn't grow up where they grew up from. We haven't had the traumas that they've had. So we actually don't know how they feel. We can be empathetic, but we don't know how they feel. And sometimes it's important that even simple things, even language around how to support someone is important, because like a physical accident, when I learned with all the medic stuff, your safety is the most important at any scene. So when it comes to mental health, your mental health is more important than anybody else's, because you're not in a position to help someone if you don't look after yourself, if that makes sense.
And I think, Louise, like when we go out, certainly when I'm out and my colleagues Aidan and Sarah, and we're championing this course to our employers, we call it wellness in the workplace, fully accredited, but it's essentially mental health first aid. But the difference in language between using mental health and wellness, like it's unbelievable. And I've seen with my own eyes going into your classes when you're delivering them that, you know, there could be a certain dynamic of people that will come in and their backs are up and they're like, I'm only here now because the boss told me that I'm here. And, you know, I'm not getting involved in this chat. And after the 2 days, they're different people sauntering out of there because you're breaking it down and delivering, but everybody connects with it. Like there is not one person in this group here present today who is not challenged weekly by some sort of, you know, headache, be it to do with nerves, anxiety, depression, stress. We all have it in our lives. But again, the language that's being used around it, just you can change people's approach just overnight.
It's so true. Like, I mean, the other, I suppose, foundation of why I set up the business is, you know, I grew up in a house where there was someone with mental health issues and addiction issues, and we weren't really allowed to discuss it outside the house. So inside the house, and it was a protection mechanism, and I understand it, and I fully respect in the time and generation that it was why it was done. But now, like when you talk to people now, I know like so many people, like everyone struggles at some point, but so many people with mental ill health and mental illness, you know, short periods and long periods of mental ill health, that say the stigma is worse than the condition itself. And can you imagine being diagnosed with, God forbid, cancer or, you know, some serious condition and having to say that the stigma is worse than the disease? Like, that's wrong. That is just wrong, you know. And that is my mission, to get rid, well, I probably won't get rid, but reduce it. Well,
it's through education, Louise. And like, as I referred to at the start of your intro, like you've educated me unbelievably, and like I get to work with you, Keith Walsh, in on our podcasting course as well, who's neurodiverse. Like what you've both taught me in those areas has been, and I would consider myself to be somebody who'd be quite open and have a good understanding, you know, of pressures in life and all the rest. But like we're constantly learning, and I think that there is nobody who does not benefit from this type of training.
100%. I mean, this is our chance on this planet. And I mean, you can look at it any way you like, but this is our chance on this planet. And my thing is, you learn constantly. If you're open to learning, you will learn constantly. And I'm the same as you, or I learn so much from you as well. And like, I find that if I don't take time to look after myself, I can't be who I want to be. You know, like I have a lot, like every other person here today, I have a lot of demands on me from every area of my life. And sometimes it's overwhelming, but I like simple things that I've started to do. And one of the, I suppose, the big things that I have learned is habits, like habits that help my mental health. Like one thing I've started doing is we got an exercise bike for my daughter, she Rose, and I was thinking, I'll never use that. I like the fresh air and I go out and whatever. For a couple of days, it was torrential rain and the rain was battering off the windows. And I was like, oh, here, I'll get on that. And now, every morning, without fail, I'm on that bike for at least 20 minutes to half an hour, no matter what. And it's not about a physical thing anymore. It's about this. My brain functions better. I'm calmer because you sweat out your stress hormone. You sweat cortisol out of your body. So I'm calmer and I feel better. And I don't have that foggy head that, you know, the miracle drug of coffee doesn't actually really give you, but we like to think it does, you know. You know, but it's
absolutely
like, I mean, it's what works for you. I mean, what works for me, I wouldn't just dare assume that what works for me, it doesn't work for, you know, will work for somebody else, because that's just not the case. Like, I think everybody has to look at their life, has to look at the influences in their life. And, you know, like, for example, when we look at our relationships, our closest relationships in our life, are they positive relationships? Are they predominantly negative relationships? Are they, you know, when it comes to negative relationships, if there are people that you don't live with, amazing. You can, you know, put boundaries in that you don't maybe see them as often, or you reduce your exposure a little bit. If it's people that you live with, you can put boundaries in. Look, I'm not willing to talk about that right now. You know, we've discussed that before. That's kind of asked and answered. You know, we're not really in the space to talk about that right now. So it's looking kind of at things that work for you. Slides again are not doing what they're supposed to do. I don't know if it's me. Oh, there we go. So like, you know, things, yeah, I don't know. There we go.
Yeah, so you're working, you're grand.
I am working. It's a nice change that I am working, or I can tell you. Mental strength is like physical strength. You know, you need to exercise the habits, good habits that work for you. Giving up bad habits, like, you know, things like we all have resentment or can feel sorry for ourselves, jealousy, you name it. And why do we need to give it up? Because every time we feel it, it prolongs the feeling. When you have thoughts, it's thoughts, emotions, behaviors. So when you think it, you develop emotions to feel it, and you can relive the experience in your head. So that's why it's important to kind of give up experiences and thoughts, habits that don't serve you. So how do you get rid of those thoughts? Feel them and move on. Like, you know, if you muck up, I mucked up a few weeks ago, a talk that I thought was online, I assumed was online. Every other talk I'd done for similar organizations were online, and it was in person. And I was really annoyed at myself. And I learned that I need to clarify maybe in future, but I was really, really frustrated at myself. And I thought to myself, okay, feel it, own it, hand up. I made a mistake. We don't say often enough, I don't know the answer to that, or I made a mistake, or I'm sorry. It's hard to do, but when you own it, you can kind of move on, accept it and move on and learn from it. So it's habits that serve you are a big thing to kind of look at, that we would talk about on the courses. So it being International Women's Day tomorrow officially, but we're celebrating it today. What are some of the biggest blocks women have? So imposter syndrome. I hate saying it, but it's true. Who am I? Who am I to be doing this? What do I know? You know, I have people in my life that can bring me back down to earth in like one sentence that kind of say, you know, something can go well. Yeah, but it could have maybe gone better. And you're like, you know what? I'm not even going there. And the other thing is, the only person you should ever compare yourself to is who you were yesterday. So especially in business and you know, in your career, comparing yourself to people who are way more established is so detrimental for your mental health. It doesn't serve you. There's no point doing it. They're different people, and you know, the best thing I can do is compare myself to my last talk or course or whatever. Fear of failure is a big one. I don't want to do that. I'll muck it up. I always muck up, but I laugh about it. So I'm still laughing about sitting behind a parked van thinking I was in traffic about 3 weeks ago. I was behind a parked van for about 4 or 5 minutes. And I had just come out of a big meeting with CEOs and of this massive company. And I was like, okay, good, look at me, this is great. And then I sat behind a parked van for 5 minutes thinking I was in the traffic lane. So my point is, I'm still laughing. So, you know, having a little bit of humor when it comes to yourself as well is not a bad thing. Undercharging, if you're in business, this is a hard one. Undercharging, you know, charging what you're worth. And it's obviously what you're worth and what someone's, you know, the market, what someone's willing to pay as well. It's a hard one. It is a massive block for women. Men, I see my husband and his business and all that, and I listen to him sometimes and go, I kind of say to myself, ooh, I wish I had the confidence. You know, my business partner would sometimes, and I would have differing opinions, and we've worked with a fabulous lady on this and about money mindset and that sort of thing, because charging is really difficult because the confidence piece comes up for yourself as well. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so coping mechanisms. So CAMS with a double L. So again, this is one that we use kind of on the courses, you know, and this actually was I came across this from a guy who led the Army Rangers in this country. And And he was out in different war zones all over the world. And this is what they use. The Special Forces, Irish Army, use this. So notice for coping kind of difficult thoughts. So notice it. Wait for the negative thoughts. They will come. Label it and just say it's just a negative thought. Don't wait with it too long and move on. Just move on, because you've noticed it, you've accepted it, and you've moved on, you've refocused. Because as opposed to suppress, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. Because what happens is if you do continue to suppress stuff, you will literally get to a point where you can't cope. And we've all been there. Okay, so this, I don't know if anyone has come across the book Atomic Habits. It's an absolutely excellent book. And what this is if you incorporate good habits in your life, and I mean simple things. I don't mean climbing, mountains or marathons, or it could be an extra glass of water a day, lads. It could be, going for a 15-minute walk. The greatest gift you can give your physical and mental health every day is 15 minutes of an elevated heart rate. So all the cardiovascular stuff it does to support your body, but for your mind as well, it's really, really good to reduce your stress levels. So I won't get into the maths there, but basically you can improve yourself by almost 38% by improving your habits by 1% every day. Little tiny things. Acknowledge your weaknesses. Acknowledge your weaknesses. I am crap at technology. Crap. Everyone that knows me. Small detail, not great. My sister, who's my business partner, sometimes reads my presentations and goes, "Would you be introducing punctuation there, Louise?" And I'd be like, "Oh, right, okay." So again, constantly saying yes to others is inadvertently saying no to yourself. So constantly saying yes to other people all the time, you are inadvertently saying no to yourself. This is a weird one. Schedule time to worry. Schedule time for yourself is important, don't get me wrong, and everyone should do it. But schedule time to worry. We worry a lot about family members or, different things, money, whatever. I'll come back to that at 6 o'clock today. I'll come back to that at 4. Again, it's just a mindset thing. Okay, and the last slide. So basically 3 life rules. I use this on a recent talk and I really like it. If you do not go after what you want, you will never have it. If you do not ask, the answer will always be no. And if you do not step forward, you will always remain in the same place. And I just want to say a massive thank you to MSL ETB for always leading the way when it comes to wellness. I think you are leading the way nationwide from what I see and all the organisations I work with by a mile. I know some people that I haven't met that I hear great things about: Peter Egan, Tom Grady, Siobhan Magner, who I've chatted properly today with, and Orla, as always, I'm your biggest fan. So thank you for having me on today, and I really appreciate it. Okay, and keep doing the amazing work, MSL ETB.
Louise, look, again, you're incredible. Like everything that you teach me on a weekly basis now, I get to take it home with me, and not even just in my work life, I get to take it home with me too. And you're a huge support, and also a huge support to our employers, because we're in a fortunate position now that we both go out and we work together on, meeting employers in some situations and working towards tailoring the Wellness in the Workplace program to suit their business and to iron out issues that they're dealing with on a daily basis. Like, we've come across a lot of new age issues as well, in terms of dealing with a younger workforce who may be engaging with, an older workforce, and how communication levels are broken down. We've definitely come across that. But again, I'm learning. I'm seeing, certainly in hospitality industries, that we're dealing with different networks there, engineering agencies, places like that are faced with a whole new set of problems that they haven't had to deal with before. For example, I know with one of our employers, he came to us and he said, listen, I just can't get these young ones to listen to me. If I say anything, they run out of the room. They've got their heads in the phone the whole time. They don't take constructive criticism. They don't play as team members because the heads are just down. I'm going, well, they've just come out of 3 years of a lockdown where all they had was their phones. But we have to understand that as well. I certainly seen from some of my own family members, but that's their connection to the outside world. But when you bring that into an office situation, it doesn't work, because if you're sitting with middle-aged Orla and middle-aged Mary who like to have the chat and the other person has the earphones in and the head down, you're kind of feeling, well, you don't really want to engage with me. Like, how would you I suppose advise employers? What's the way around that? Because it does create conflict.
That's a really good question. And it is a problem with a lot of, I see it in my own house. I mean, I have to restrict technology here, and only this morning my niece was here and I haven't seen her in a week before school. And I said, do you want to take your head out of your phone and actually answer a question? She who recently lost her phone by putting it in the fridge because she was on a video call and then couldn't find the phone. And I just laughed and didn't say anything. Idiot. So yeah, I know, it's just hilarious. And the person, hello, in the fridge, I was like, right. But it's a real challenge. I mean, I suppose there has to be a mutual respect both sides of the fence, I mean, there's lots of different generations that work in all organizations, and a lot of, like, I was doing a course there the day after I was in Sligo last week, and in Carlow, and I had a broad group of guys in the room, and the youngest guy in the room, he was about 21, 22, and he said to me, he goes, I'm not a number, I just want to be treated like a human being. Like, I'm not this man, I'm a human being, like, I mean, and he goes, I want to learn, but I'm not willing to be treated like crap. And I thought, okay, and then with the HR director in the room as well. So I thought, well, that's fairly brave, number one, coming out with this. But also, and she was like, okay, well, maybe we need to have a conversation about this. And, he was just saying that the younger element of the organization, they felt very disrespected. So, there are, things like, I mean, even doing joint things together, like even activities, or like, whether it's in the workplace or, getting out for the day, or, doing something as a group, or allowing them, like one company does it very well, actually. They have different teams for different stuff. And basically everybody on the team gets to lead a meeting, no matter what age they are. So every week, so say 25-year-old Johnny is up and he's leading this week's meeting, and they bring the issues, the things that worked well, things that didn't work well, and they lead it. And they'll be dying off and they'll be having panic attacks before it and all that. But it works because they feel part of the group and they feel connected. But the technology side of things, I mean, there's addictions now with phones and scrolling, and we're all like, I consciously. Yeah, we are. Like,
we're all part of that, and that's like my connection to the outside world, outside of work, and putting Fee into bed at night is like, let's see what's happening on Instagram, or and that's just my switch off for 10 minutes when he's asleep on me. But a quick question I have for you, and I can't pass your section, Louise, without bringing this up. The whole area of peri and menopause in the workplace is something I have really delved into in the last year. My eyes are open. So I'm in my late 40s, and I have a lovely group of my best buddies for life in their late 40s. And this is something that keeps coming up in our chats, and people going through there, and all professional women. And again, when I started with MSLE2B, I walked into this massive agency full of professional women. And then I was going, right, well, what do we do about all of these issues within our agency? How do we talk? How do I talk to somebody else about it? Like, how do I engage in conversation? And blessed I am, because our management crew are so supportive in bringing all of these necessities to the forefront, and allowing us to put them on as topics in our wellness course, and allowing us to open dialogue and discussion within our workplace, and seeing what we can all do to raise the issues, to deal with it, and to provide support and structure for women, and to provide education to women and to men about what happens in this area. What you see a lot of, and what you and Trudy have talked about before, is the retention of women at this age. They just drop off. They drop off, and the stats are unreal.
It's a big problem. It's a big problem. And I think as well, I mean, you know, there's a lot of it's a really good idea to have a menopause policy, which will support women in the workplace that are going through it. A lot of women as well can get misdiagnosed at the beginning, so that again they could be going through stuff and they're not even aware. Like I was put on antidepressants when I should have been given HRT, so then had to wean off the antidepressants to go. I mean, you know what I mean. So I suppose the policy should incorporate, you know, things like if you have like insomnia, for example, is there an adjustment for a later start time, you know, if that option comes up, and maybe start a little bit later and finish a bit later? Is there, you know, the same old argument in office spaces about the thermostat? The thermostat is there. Oh my God.
I am straight to the radiator. Get it, turn it off. Turn it off, please.
So we walked through an office recently and I thought I was going to pass out. I was like, geez, I'm sweating. So again, it's like having access to a fan or a window, you know, in your space, because again, you have people that are always cold, people that are always hot, and that's a real issue, because you can't, like, if you're in having the sweats, like, it's really, really, it's very tiring. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also as well, the brain fog. Like, I've been people ringing me after meetings before I got the right HRT, because I'm in early menopause, ringing me kind of going, are you okay? Like, you came across like you hit your head before that meeting. And I was like, oh God. I was like, because my brain, it just doesn't function the same. You forget what, you know, like the thing and the connected to the thing, and you look like an absolutely crazy person. But in fact, it's acknowledging that there is brain fog, and, you know, it's going easy on people when they are going through it, and supporting them, like, with things like the adjustments that an office space can make. You know, I work with companies, everything from SMEs right up to multinationals, and obviously it depends on the size of company, what supports they can offer. But having a fan for someone who's sitting sweating, I mean, that's not a big deal. Like, you can have a fan for them, like, no. Whereas, you know, working hybrid sometimes as well, if that option's available, it's not available in every role. Having access to, like, having bathrooms stocked as well, because sometimes, you know, heavy bleeding and all that sort of thing. And men absolutely need to be educated on this. Men will run to the other side of the country. We do need it.
We do need it. We're all learning, but I think the greatest thing is the conversation, and to be able to share stories, and also women empowering women. Like, I love learning from women that are ahead of me down the line. I love hearing from women. You know what, or some night you're going to get a night's sleep where the child does not end up in the bed on top of you. Some night he'll stay in his own bed. Like, things like that. And I go, really, is it going to happen? Because you're just going around in a fog, be it motherhood, be it your work, be it menopause, but having conversations that are real within your workplace and within your support structures are a necessity. I'm very conscious of time. One last question for you, Louise, that came in there. What are the most common issues that you've come across with different organizations regarding mental health?
So I suppose, like, one that comes up a lot is, what can you do when somebody pulls the mental health card in an organization? And this comes up time and time again. And what I always say to that is, there will be a percentage of people that will always take the mick. There was a percentage of people in COVID that, you know, and we're off for 2 weeks paid leave. You will get a percentage that always kind of, you know, play on it a little bit. However, have a mental health policy. A lot of people say, yeah, but we've a health and safety. Have a specific mental health policy that applies and works for your organization. And what I mean by that is, obviously there's the appropriate legislation that applies here, but you work on what you accept as an organization. Multinationals can accept different levels of support versus SMEs, but you work with what you accept, because in this situation, like, what happens when somebody returns from being off with depression or anxiety or whatever, what happened? Like, anxiety is a good example. So they're going to be really anxious about coming back. Maybe it was post-COVID as well, so they're going to have extra anxiety. So who cleans the office space? How often is the area cleaned? You know, is it your responsibility to clean it? What's expected from this person normally in this situation? How would you like to adjust in this situation? What can we do to support you? Is this something you are open to doing, like coming back on a staged kind of basis, or would you prefer, you know, working hybrid? It depending on what options are available. Obviously, I respect that. But again, this is what's expected normally. Is this something you can work with, or is there something more we can do to support you? Because
Amazing.
people step around this like a time bomb. I'm conscious of time, so I'll leave it there.
Totally, and they do skip around it. Thank you so much, Louise. Look, we could be doing webinars on it every single day. I'm not going to delay. This wonderful lady who I've had the pleasure of working with in the past in my days as Síle Seoige MD, and within the Irish language, we crossed paths on a couple of different TV shows over the years. Sheila has been working for over 26 years, I think, in the media industry, on her own range of programs, various TV stations, including TG4, RTE, and more recently working on the podcast that connected me so much more to Sheila, called Ready to Be Real. And I think I said to Sheila the other day, like, I knew Sheila through the Gaeilge over the years, but it was only when I was sitting at home with a baby underneath me as well that I really got to know Sheila through her podcast, her honesty, vulnerability, connection to women, and ability also to be able to tell her own story and make you feel like you're in the room and bring others on board as well. The documentary, Sheila, that you did in 2021 also on the topic of miscarriage, like, absolutely, it was mind-blowing. And I think so many of us that tuned in and watched that, the empathy that we could have for ourselves as women, for you, and for those around us, because it's a common day occurrence in all of our peer groups and families. You're an incredible person, and I am so delighted to welcome you here today on behalf of MSLE TV, Sheila. Thank you so much. Gur míle maith agat as ucht bhealinn.
Wow, Orla, I'm really, first up, gur míle maith hain. I'm very humbled by what you just said there. I really am. It means an awful lot. And yeah, like, I feel for me, working on the podcast, working on the likes of, say, that documentary on the topic of miscarriage, I think this is where I'm finally at this point in my life doing work that really enriches my life. And that's where I'm at now. So yeah, you're dead right. 26 years ago, I dipped my toe in the world of media and I got bitten by the bug. It happened by accident. I was actually intending on doing law in college, but I got this opportunity to present a TV show with the Dare Productions, who you've worked with before, and I have as well. So I was, I presented a TV show. I deferred my college course. I got bitten by the bug. I stayed with it. And here I am, over 25 years later, still in the realm of media work, although I'm doing very different work now than I was when I started out. And I'm much more, I suppose, considered about my choices in terms of what I do now, what I give my time to, and yeah, what I feel is an aligned fit for me. That's not always easy, I think, when you start to make decisions that are based from your value system. It can sometimes, your bank manager might prefer you to say yes to more work that brings in more money, but might not feel like it's aligned with where I'm at. And I really feel, actually, if you were to ask me to have taken part in this webinar 6 months ago versus now, you might have got a different version of me. I feel like I've changed a lot over the past number of months, and I don't think that's a negative. I really think it's a positive, but it's because of what's happening globally. I feel there's a huge shift happening in me personally. Before I get into all of that, I want to say, actually, I took so much from listening to Siobhan and Louise there. A lot of wisdom, a lot of knowledge. And I was kind of nodding along with a lot of what was being said as well, in terms of what's important in terms of looking after ourselves. So without kind of going through my whole backstory career, I started at 19. I worked in loads of different stuff. But fast forward, I suppose, to my 30s. I feel like my 30s was my decade of really learning a lot about myself. I was faced with a lot of things that weren't the most comfortable. So I went through a diagnosis of cancer. I went through breakup, 2 relationships. I went through job loss, lots of different things. And as you mentioned, I've also had the experience of miscarriage, which unfortunately is very common. I know I'm not the only one, certainly not, but there was a feeling that it was still one of the we don't really talk about it too much topics, whereas thankfully that is changing, which is really, really good. But I feel like I learned a lot about myself through that time. And again, I feel like I'm going through a huge learning curve over the past few months, over what we're being exposed to, what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening in Palestine, and what that's bringing up for me as somebody who is a trained yoga and meditation teacher. I went into that in a big way after my experience of having cancer. And it was a huge help to me personally, and I was able to apply it then into different types of work that I do. But I feel like I've been faced with the privilege that we live with here in the West. And I've kind of been uncomfortable with my own sense of what I would have come out with in terms of like sound bites and statements I would have said in the past about everything happens for a reason. Things I still probably say myself, and I would have said these things, and we're the masters of our own destiny and all that. That's fine to say when we're living in this part of the world, when we have choice and we have autonomy and we have all of, the normal rights that we live with. But you can't apply that to parts of the world where people's basic human rights are being taken away. It's not a political conversation. I just wanted to get to frame where I'm at the moment. I feel there's a lot going on in me as a person. I also heard the news this morning, and probably a lot of people who've tuned in here have, that the amazing Galway girl, she was only 12 years of age. She was on the toy show many moons ago, and she was the inspiration behind the toy show appeal. The wonderful Saoirse Ruan lost her battle to cancer, and she passed away. Yeah, she passed away on Tuesday. I mean, desperately sad. So I suppose you're constantly being reminded of what a privilege it is to be alive, to be here. Every morning we wake up, and it sounds cliched, but it's bloody true. Every morning we wake up, and if our bodies are functioning and our mind is functioning and working with us, it's not always maybe exactly where we want it to be, and we're all faced with challenge, and people watching now could be going through their own stuff that is difficult. But as long as we can function and we can do things, there's the capacity for change and to bring about change in our lives. And what I would always say is things are always moving and changing. Nothing stays the same. And I think we don't recognize how much we've actually achieved in our own lives. We don't necessarily give ourselves enough credit for what we've actually come through. And the last number of years have been so challenging for everyone. Whether they feel like they kind of breathe through COVID or not, it did have an impact. So we kind of have to give each other slack as well. And what you're talking about there, about that generation that are kind of maybe sucked into their phones right now, and that disconnect and that uncomfortable feeling they maybe have with talking to others, that is there for a reason. So we need to have compassion for ourselves and each other, and realize that actually we've probably already experienced a lot in our lives. We don't know what's around the corner, but I think minding ourselves and minding others around us is the most important thing we'll do in life. It is the impact we have on other people. That's really the stuff that matters.
Mm-hmm. You're spot on there, Sheila. And yes, we're all facing different things. And I suppose, you're so right. And without it becoming political, we're very influenced by what we see around us. And that affects our humor and our mood and our own wellness and our own, you can't switch off from watching what's happening everywhere. And we're bringing that to work with us every day too, because it's definitely, it's infiltrating our brains and our own humors. How do you deal with kind of, you're getting up in the morning with two small kids as well. How do you deal with keeping yourself on a level all the time, Sheila, when, you're experiencing your own stuff?
I'm not going to lie, it's not easy. I've found that what I try and do is avoid looking at the likes of Instagram, say, when I'm with my kids, so that I can be present with them and I can't be distracted, because I'm not very good at hiding my feelings. And they're too young to understand. Cathal is 6, and we have a 2-year-old girl, Cleona, and the 6-year-old is aware that there's bad things happening in this part of the world, and innocent people are suffering. He understands that, but it's a very basic level, because I'm struggling to explain it to him, and I'm trying to also protect him from it. But what I find is when they're down asleep at night, that's when I kind of might look at messages that I've received, or look at content that I might be avoiding looking at. And that's sometimes when the feelings come up. They might come out in grief, in tears. They might come out in feelings of anger, which I'm feeling a lot of, actually, and frustration with the state of the world, really, to be honest. But then, as Louise said, we need to have outlets as well. It's really important to laugh. It's really important to, be silly. It's really important to have all these releases, because there's a lot coming at us in our own little circle, in our own little lives, whatever that looks like for us as individuals, and then globally. So we do need to really, really look after ourselves so that we can stay engaged with whatever level that we feel is appropriate and what feels right for us. Because the last thing you want is to burn out. The last thing you want is to numb out from the feelings as well. I think it's important to feel. I think those who are feeling this time need to give themselves a little bit of credit that actually your experience is a very normal one. We should be feeling. the stuff that's happening is dreadful. And, you know, we what I would worry is that people normalize it and think it's okay. It's not okay. And if you're feeling it, you're actually having a very normal human response to an awful thing that's happening at the moment. So look, yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in lots of different tools, because I suppose I've trained in yoga, and I saw the benefit of that for me personally, because I wasn't doing so well. When I was going through cancer, I really struggled, obviously, you know, at the time, and a lot came at me in the 1 year. I also went through a breakup of a relationship, and I lost my job in the same year. So it was a really, really intense time in my life. And I knew that if I didn't actively try and help myself, that it was only going to get worse. So that's what I did. I threw myself into a yoga class. I really found it hugely beneficial. It was yoga therapy. It was very intuitive, and I found it really cathartic. And then I went on a path of study, which has been a real benefit to me personally. And then to my life, I've been able to bring it into lots of different areas.
And during that time, like I remember that, Síle, and you know, you're a few years younger than I am, and I'm going, how does Síle Seoige have cancer? Like, but my friend had the same type of cancer around the same time as well. But it was our first intro to hearing about, I think, a young person going through cancer, and this is something that's part of all of our lives, all of the time. But like for you, how did you balance your public persona, which you had in spades at that stage as well, with what was going on in your life?
Yeah, it was very strange. I mean, I'm the youngest of 4 kids. There's no cancer. Like, my parents thankfully haven't had experience of cancer, and neither have my siblings. And, you know, not really anyone on either side of my parents have cancer. So it was an although I knew people to it, not within my family. So it came as a huge shock. Like, I'm not even juicing the way I was, but before I got diagnosed with cancer, like I was waking up in the morning and I was doing the most vile green concoction full of kale and spirulinas and your apple cider vinegars, and it was absolutely gross. But I used to lurry it into me. I mean, I was really physically healthy, you know. But again, there's that saying that you can't. What is it again? You can't alkalize a toxic mental state. You know, you could be doing all the right things physically, but we're not just our physical form. We are what's going on in our thoughts. We're what's going on in our emotions and in our body as well. And they all play a part in our overall health and well-being. So I had a lot of stress before I was diagnosed with cancer. Now that, like, I suppose looking back on it, I can understand that perhaps that played a part. But again, you know, you can be somebody that smokes and drinks and then you get cancer, and then maybe you can say, oh, well, that's the reason why. Or you can be somebody else who never touched a cigarette, or, you know, has been running every single day of the week and gets it. So there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just one of those things. For me personally, I definitely feel that it was stress related. But again, that's my personal belief. Somebody else might completely disagree with me. But at the time, it was very strange. I found it very, very strange to manage the work thing, because I was going back to work, and initially nobody knew that I had cancer. My bosses knew, but that was it. And there used to be a photographer. He's actually a really nice fellow, but there used to be a photographer hanging out outside Marconi House, which is where Today FM is. So Today FM and different stations are in the one building. And he'd be there trying to grab, if there was a celebrity in the building, he'd be trying to grab a photo of them as they walk in. Like, say now, leading up to the Oscars, it might be Cillian Murphy going in for an interview. So they, you know, they'd be outside trying to nab them to get some coverage in online, you know, articles or whatever. And I was going into work, and he decided to take a photo of me. I'm not a celebrity. I just worked there, but he just said, look, there was no one else around. I'll take your photo. And I remember not having a panic attack. I don't have experience of a panic attack, but I'd say I came close to that feeling, because I started to feel like I couldn't breathe. I started to feel really claustrophobic. And he was actually a really nice guy. And I just told him, please don't, I'm not able for this. I was hiding in big scarves and big jumpers, and I just wanted to hide away, because I hadn't come to the point where I was able to talk about it publicly yet. When I did talk about it publicly, it was like a weight was lifted off me. It was the best thing I did. It was great. I was really glad, but it was a scary thing until I got to that point, because, you know, I suppose you don't want to, like, although I'm very comfortable with the vulnerability now, it was, I didn't want people to pity me. And that's something I did struggle with. You know, people, they mean well and they didn't mean to cause harm. But actually, when you pity somebody who's going through a difficult time, you actually make them feel worse. So that would be a thing I'd say to anyone. If you have somebody that you love or somebody that you know that's going through a difficult time, rather than sympathizing with them, that doesn't do them any good. Having compassion for them, holding space for them, asking them how they are, and allowing them to dictate the mood rather than projecting your own sympathy onto them. Because sometimes what would happen to me is there was a guy at work and he used to come over and give me the puppy dog eyes, and he meant well, but it used to drive me nuts. And he just wanted to hug me all the time. And I'm a hugger, I'm a very tactile person, but this guy I did not want to hug, because I was like, stop feeling sorry for me, because what he was doing was every time he did that, I would be trying so hard not to bawl crying. And I didn't want to be crying in front of everybody in the office. I wanted to try and separate this thing I was going through to my professional life. And this guy meant well, but actually I was allergic to him. I was like, please don't come near me, because every time you do this, you make me feel awful, and all I want to do is cry. So look, we're never going to get it right. I have put my foot in it many a time. I'll probably continue to put my foot in it. But I think compassion is the most important thing in life across the board. When we have compassion for ourselves and other people, we're operating from a very intuitive place of just care for somebody else, really caring for them. And sometimes that means saying nothing, just being there, being with them, you know?
Yeah, I totally get that. Like you're obviously in the public eye an awful lot, and with being in the public eye comes scrutiny and pressure. But being in the workforce, there is scrutiny and pressure. And like I could have somebody scrutinizing me behind my back. I might never know about it, but you could feel it. Or there may be conflict that you don't even know about. But with scrutiny and pressure, how do you deal with it? How do you close off for that? Like, what would you say to all of the the attendees here today? From your point of view, like obviously you're getting a lot more. People are writing up about you, in the magazines, on Instagram or whatever. How do you shut yourself off from that, Síle?
I think one of the most liberating things is understanding and really truly absorbing the fact that knowing that not everybody's going to like you, not everybody's going to agree with you, and that's the same for you with them. We can't like and appreciate and respect everything and everyone, and that's just the way of the world. And I think when we accept that, we drop people pleasing and we drop this need to be liked by others. I think once you start to really drop into who you are, nobody can come at you. It's almost like you have this invisible force field, because you're somebody who is able to own mistakes, because I mess up a lot. I'm able to say I'm sorry when I do. I'm never going to get it right all the time, because that's not the reality of being a real human being in the world. But when you stop worrying about what other people think and pleasing everyone all of the time, it's liberating. It drops away, because like I've had it plenty of times, and I will continue to get it, where you get messages sent to your direct message on Instagram that are sometimes not very kind. And rather than allowing it in, I will just say, okay, that's that person's opinion. That's not mine. They're entitled to that. If there's a lesson to be learned in it for me, I'll try and take the lesson out of it. Otherwise, if it's just being nasty for nasty's sake, I will just kind of almost like send it back to that person, say, it's not mine. I'm not taking that gift from you that you're trying to give me. But I definitely think that things like dropping people pleasing, having boundaries in your life, it is possible to be a kind, good, warm, funny, decent human being, and also say no, and also say, I'm not happy with that. I don't agree with that. It's important to be able to have boundaries, and you can still have all the other stuff. But when you're assertive, and I think this is where the difference is, unfortunately, with men and women, and we are obviously talking about International Women's Day. When a man is assertive, he's seen as a leader. He's seen as being strong, and it's admirable. When a woman is standing up for herself and having that sense of strength, she's often labeled a bitch. She's often labeled difficult. And this is where we need to get rid of all that, because it's nonsense. You can be strong and good and kind, and also be well able to stand in your power and say, no, I can't do that, and not have to make up a million reasons why. So when it comes to scrutiny, we all experience it. But I think I suppose the way to counteract that is, I think the more you actually lean into who you really are, trust in who you really are, the less you'll be impacted by that, the less you'll worry about the thoughts of other people or the opinions of other people. If you know you're giving your job the best, or whatever it is that you're working on, if you're giving it your best, there's nothing else you can do. Yes, there's always room for learning and growth. But if you know I gave that but my best shot. If somebody is still picking holes in it, there's not much I can do about that. You have to trust in your own ability and your own efforts, and you're never always going to get it right. That's just the reality of living.
No, and I think what Louise said there earlier about, like, Louise putting your hands up and saying, I got it wrong. I mean, we all get things wrong, regardless of our age, regardless of our experience, and we all have bad days. And I think, you know, working in busy, dynamic, professional environments, as we all do, we have to allow for that in other people as well, and be mindful of it, because you don't know what's coming into work with another person throughout the day. And we're all, we did a course a couple of weeks ago, and it was on unconscious bias, and I was going, oh my God, am I actually the most biased person I've met? Like, because we initially have this bias from the first couple of seconds of seeing somebody, seeing their facial reaction, seeing their mood, or feeling their mood, which is energy you're absorbing from somebody else. And it's very hard to remove yourself as not being the victim of their energy, to go, oh, what's wrong with that person today? And especially in management, when you have very little time.
That's a brilliant point. And I think that's the thing we need to also be aware, that we are products of our upbringing, our environment. We're not just a product of this lifetime. We're also a product of our ancestors that went before us. You know, if anyone who's into epigenetics or anything, we have come to this point in our lives because of all the people in our lineage that went before us. And a lot of traits, a lot of belief systems, a lot of toxic traits as well, unfortunately, as well as good ones, have been passed down from generation to generation. And there's a theory that some people are the cycle breakers within their family, and that can sometimes be very difficult work to stop certain traits from carrying forward to future generations. So if people are watching this right now and they feel like they're having difficult relationships within maybe family members or friends, it could be because you're the truth teller in your scenario. It could be because you're starting to stand outside the status quo and, okay, is this the way it was always done, but is this the right way it was always done? And when you talk about those kind of unconscious biases, I remember doing a test when I was working in News Talk. There was a guy, Jonathan McRae, who has the science show, and he did a test. He took a few of us in the office and he said, will you do this test? It's about basically finding out if you're a racist. And I signed myself up, because I said, I am the most un-racist person. I'm all about love and light and everything's fine. So I did this test, and it took about an hour. It was really, really detailed, and it was just faces. In the end, I was mid-range on the racist kind of spectrum. And when I really delved into why, it was all the reasons that I wasn't even aware of, that I was finding one face because of certain facial features more trustworthy than others. And that's not me, but again, it's in there. It's in my DNA. It's not, and it's not about blaming my parents or their parents before, but this is the impact of the societies in which we live. Again, I feel like all the stuff is being brought up into the light at the moment over the past number of months, and how we live in the West versus other parts of the world. And what, you know, this is big work. This is huge work. So I get the point you're making. And I think we need to be aware that there are so many different factors at play. For me, it's not just about learning and doing better. It's the huge piece for me is the unlearning,
That's letting go. Such a good point. Yeah. Unlearning.
The letting go. Yeah. The letting go of the things, the way we behave, the way we respond to situations that actually aren't serving us well at all. And that we have it's become our normal. It's, you know, these are unconscious behaviors that, you know, we pick up. And how many times when people become parents, they find they can hear their own mother's voice when they're speaking to their kid. Yeah, do you know? And that's not necessarily a bad thing as well. Sometimes it's like, oh no, did I just say that exactly the same way she said it? Because we're products of our own upbringing. That's just the reality.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's definitely embedded into us. And again, like, you know, how we deal with people on a daily basis. We're definitely unconscious. But like, going back to the racism point, and that was something that came out of that seminar that day, which I found incredibly interesting. But, you know, you get on a plane, you look around you and you see a person with a particular color skin, you know, your immediate thought could be, oh, you know, they're up there. And this is something that came up and everyone went, yeah. Does it make you racist? Does it make me racist? I don't know, but it's what's ingrained into us from our initial, you know, unconscious biased look at somebody that we pass, and we do that throughout the day in work. So it's nice to kind of remind yourself sometimes just to stop and go, right, it's not just me here, it's other people and what they're feeling as well also. That brings me to my next question now. So as it's International Women's Day, we cannot pass the opportunity to ask you, Síle. Like, I know from working in the bit of TV that I've done over the years, and certainly from engaging with other colleagues that you would have worked closely with, you know, it's a fairly male-dominated environment for the most part. And many industries, and I talked about retention in women and dropping out of work in your 50s, or maybe when you've had kids, it's really hard to go back and have the confidence to go back to work after having children, or not. But what strategies have you employed over the years, and I'm sure you've come up against them, to maintain your focus and assert yourself, you know, in terms of your right to assert yourself and your presence within a demanding, sometimes maybe toxic environment?
Yeah. I'm reminded of something that happened very early in my career. So I'm going to share this now. I won't give names, but
Don't do that.
I was in a job, right? And I was doing the same job as another guy. Okay. We were both doing exactly the same job. And I don't know, one day in the canteen, we were talking, I don't know how it came up, but we were talking about how much money we were making effectively, what it was. And I discovered that despite the fact that I actually had a bit more experience than the other person, I'd already done a year on presenting TV. This was very early in my career. This person hadn't. They'd come straight from another job. They were earning more than me. So I saw red. I remember, and I've always struggled with this. Have I always been assertive thing? And my family and my friends will always say, yes, Síle, you were always assertive. But I remember, and I don't know whether it was a certain time of the month, but I remember seeing red and going down to my boss, whacking on the door and going in. And what I discovered was not alone was I being paid less, I was being paid below the pay grade.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I remember kicking up fuss. They agreed that it was wrong, and then I was placed where I should have been. But I was like, if I didn't discover that, and if I didn't go down and have that discussion, would they have just continued to pay me the way I was? Probably. So
That's
I learned
question,
very quick. I learned very quickly, very early in my career, that it's not a level playing field when it comes to men and women, unfortunately. And I've had plenty of situations through my career where I've discovered that me being booked for a job and a guy being booked for a job doing the same thing, the rates can be different. But sometimes that comes down to men are sometimes just better at saying, this is my fee. This is what I need you to give me. And that sometimes, and again, it's back to Louise was talking about the imposter syndrome. Sometimes we struggle to speak up for ourselves. But yeah, I think, you know, I've had to contend with it, as many of us have. It's just the reality of it. I actually spoke to an amazing woman not so long ago on my podcast that you mentioned there. It's called Ready to Be Real. And I spoke to this amazing woman. Her name is Dr. Miriam Francois. She's an award-winning documentary filmmaker. She was talking about this idea that as women, we get better as we get older. We get more into ourselves, stronger, better sense of who we are. And I absolutely agree with her. I like myself more now than I did 10 years ago. I certainly feel I'm radically different to what the woman I was in my 20s. And I'm looking forward to the next 10, 20, 30 and beyond years to see who I grow into more and more. But she was saying that maybe in terms of the media, she was posing this, and I thought, wow, I think you're absolutely right. I think the media want to have younger women on TV because younger women on TV don't question things as much as a more experienced woman would. They're not as assertive, perhaps, because they're still finding their feet. So you'll often find, now thankfully you will see women past a certain age on TV, but they are in the minority. The media business is kinder towards the older guy than he is towards the older woman. You'll find that you'll have the older guy coupled with the younger female TV presenter a lot. That's the model that's used a lot here in the UK and the US. But look, you know, I just feel that it's something we have to contend with, but we have, you know, this is where it's an invitation to all of us to actually tap into who we are. And even if we're feeling scared and feeling like we can't stand up for ourselves, imagine yourself maybe as the younger you. What would you want for your younger self? If you, or imagine, you know, like if you had a kid, what would you want for them? Would you want somebody to stand up for them? You would. So be that person for yourself. Stand up for yourself. You know, say if you're not happy, and express your feelings, because nobody's a mind reader either. They're not going to know if you're unhappy about something. But if you feel like you're being unfairly treated, don't allow it to build up, because it'll only go toxic, and it'll only build bitterness and resentment, and that won't get you anywhere. It's far healthier to tackle an issue straight on and talk to a work colleague or a boss and express your feelings if you're feeling like you're not being seen as much as your male counterpart, if that's the situation.
And what would you say, like we come across this often with women in employment who feel like they have imposter syndrome and can push themselves forward for the management course, or can push themselves forward for promotions, etc., across the board. Like, what would you say to that woman? What does she do? How does she approach that within herself?
I suppose I'm a big believer that, you know, the person that turns up at work is the same person that goes home and lives their life outside of work. So the best advice I would have is, if you haven't started to maybe do a little bit of work on yourself, as in the personal development piece, which is, I know, kind of what you wanted to kind of get a sense of from me. I really feel when you start to work on who you are, what your value system is, what matters to you, what needs care and attention, what needs to be perhaps, you know, fixed if it needs fixing, or that needs adjustment, that needs help, be that therapy, or getting yourself into something like, you know, like a running group or yoga class or whatever works for you. I think the more you invest in who you are, the more it'll get easier to stand up for yourself in a work situation, and you will thrive in your work. So I'm a big believer in investing in yourself, so that therefore all aspects of your life will improve. Your relationships with your people will improve, within your family and your friends and your work colleagues as well. So I would say it's not just as easy as, oh, just stand up for yourself. Sometimes these things take time. It does take time. Like when I started to really look at myself, I was years. I mean, I still am. It's a work in progress, you know, where you're never done. You know, you're always tweaking and learning and going backwards, as the case may be. Sometimes you feel like, oh God, I learned that lesson and now I'm back to exactly where I was before. How am I here? But look, you have to go easy on yourself. That's just life. But I mean, I spent years of studying yoga and doing lots of different retreats and learning about myself in a big way. And sometimes when you start to look at yourself that in that way, you're looking at the things that you don't particularly like, but you have to embrace all of who you are, to accept the person you are, realize that you're not perfect. None of us are. We're all flawed. But that's the beauty of life, you know, and you have to accept that if I'm flawed, so is everybody else. And that's okay too.
That's the thing, Sheila. And I think, like, such a good point, that you can't expect to be able to just, some people have a natural confidence, but we have to work on our demons and we have to work on our flaws before we can become maybe the truest version of ourselves, or the best aiming. I don't know if we're ever at the best version of ourselves, but you aim to be at the best version of yourself. And it's that brings you into a vulnerability within yourself, because you've got to explore that. But once you do, it's quite liberating, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is. Very much.
And we're all a work in progress.
Totally. And I feel like nobody can come at you when you are embracing who you are. There's nowhere to hide. It's not like somebody can come along and open up the skeletons in the closet, as they say, because wait a second, I'm already telling you about all my skeletons. I've already had that conversation, so you can't come at me. So as I said, I feel like you become a little bit bulletproof when you do say, this is me, warts and all. And I was not that person in my 20s. I was really all about I want people to see this aspect of me, and I was all about putting the mask on. And because of the industry I worked, it was easier to do that in a way. That's very destructive. It's very destructive for your sense of self and well-being when you try and act a certain way rather than just being the person you are. So I feel like I feel like I'm freer now in my career than I ever was. And you know, although I've had ups and downs, and I've been employed, I've been unemployed, you know, that's the nature of a freelancer. All I've ever known is the kind of the weird non-structure of it, and it suits my personality. But what I love about the work I do now is I get to say yes to gorgeous projects like this one, talk to you, have a really normal, honest conversation that this now will fill me up for the day. And I know that.
Yeah.
But I also get to say no to the stuff that comes in that go, oh, that's not a right fit for me. I know that I'm not the right person for that. There's no hard feelings, but it's liberating. And I know bills have to be paid, and I'm fully aware that, like, we're building a house at the moment. It's not easy. We have 2 kids. We're trying to work to have a nice life for them. But there's also a thing of, you have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror at night and like the person who's looking back at you. And you have to be proud of the decisions you make. And that's where I'm at, because I suppose we're all aware of how fleeting life is. We're very lucky to be here, but none of us know what's around the corner. None of us have a crystal ball to predict, but we are in, whether you're religious or spiritual or you're an atheist, we have this lifetime. And I want to, whenever that time comes when I'm looking back on it, I want to be able to feel that I lived a decent life and that I was decent to others and myself. And that's really all that matters. Not the car you drive, the money in the bank, although those things are nice, don't get me wrong, of course they are, but they're not what matters when it comes down to it. It's not what's important. What's important is how you were in the world, how you behaved, and the impact you had on other people. That is the most powerful thing in the world, is the impact you have on others.
It is. And Síle, like, Ready to Be Real, like, it's literally the best title ever for your podcast. And as I said, I knew you years ago when I was backstage with you with the Dare in RTE, and Roisin Duran was running around after you with her makeup brushes and everything. And Síle was the presenter. But when I was sitting at home, like, listening to you over the last couple of years, and especially when the baby was there with me too, I was like, oh my God, this girl, like I feel like I know you, because everything you talk about is who you really are, but it's who we all really are. And if we can be ready to be real in our work environments as well, it opens us up more to inviting in relationships. Like, we have to be real with employers. We have to be real with our colleagues, because you cannot mask who you really are all of the time. And I think if we allow for more of that in our daily working environment, we will reduce stress, conflict, all of these things that we're carrying so heavily on our shoulders. One last question, Síle, and I'm going to introduce my director then into the chat. But you've got so many roles to juggle. We all do, and with all of the people that are online at the moment, like, we all suffer from burnout the odd time, Síle. We all do. And you're going to a football match at 7 o'clock in the evening, you're up maybe at 6 o'clock in the morning, or you've sick children, you've all of this, and work demands that you've got to come home and maybe do at 10 o'clock at night when kids are asleep. Like, what advice would you give to people to kind of maintain themselves, maintain a balance throughout all of that?
Well, it was funny. Last night, the kids went out to sleep, but Cleona, who's 2, was not going down to sleep. And I was in the room with her, losing my mind, going, oh God, is she ever going to go off? In the end, Damien, my partner, said, just bring her up. It's not happening. She's not going down. So we did, brought her up. Next thing, she put her coat on. She packed her little bag. She said, I'm going off on my holidays. She was going out the door on her holidays. And we've now inherited a cat. A stray cat turned up at our door last week. We now have a cat. We're now cat owners. This is brand new. And she was off on her holidays with Lucius the cat. That's the name of the cat, right? So that was happening last night. And then we went, okay, well, let's just shut down and go down to bed. So we went down to bed. We finally got her off to sleep, and we had an amazing night's sleep. And I'm not saying that in a smug way. I'm saying it that I needed it, because I have been burning the midnight oil. I've had stuff on every day this week, and I'm extremely grateful for it. But as you know, Orla, in this industry, when it rains, it pours. And when you're freelance, there's an element of, you got to take the work, but it's there, the right work. So I'm doing a lot this week. I'm going to Dublin in a while. I have 2 events on tomorrow, one in Dublin, one in Mayo. So there's a lot going on at the moment. And when I'm with the kids, I'm trying to drink them up. But it meant that last night, we all got a really good night's sleep. So I feel reborn today. Sometimes it's the simple stuff. Are you sleeping enough? Are you drinking enough water? I often don't drink enough water. But have I eaten proper meals? Sometimes we're so busy that we haven't eaten in hours and hours, and then we finally eat. All we want is a bag of crisps. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not a judgment. But are you fueling yourself right? Sometimes it's the back to basics stuff. Are you taking a proper deep breath? Have you gone out in nature today? Did you go for a quick walk? If you don't have time for a walk, did you even just get outside, take a few big deep breaths? So I really feel that when you're starting to feel like you're struggling, or you're borderline burnout, you got to pare it back to the bare minimum of, what am I doing Am I, there's all these memes going around about this, somebody
I
saying,
know.
I'm really struggling. And then the other person says, well, did you sleep enough? Did you eat? Did you go? But it is, I know it
Yes.
sounds obvious, but sometimes we forget the obvious when we're overwhelmed and we're on this go, and we're juggling and we're minding everyone else and we're not looking after ourselves. So sometimes you have to just have that early night, or, turn off Netflix or whatever it is, and just say, okay, wait a second, I actually need throw myself into bed now and see if I can get a decent block of sleep. And sometimes that'll be the thing that'll help. Certainly it's helped me today.
Well, my dad always says, Sheila, and he's a great man for cooking dinners. He always goes, the simple things work, love. The simple things work. And I'm a firm believer. I want to introduce you, Sheila, to our director, Peter Egan, who certainly has championed me as a newbie in the organisation as well to develop and create and bring about more innovation. Peter is the director of FET and is so supportive to us, certainly on the Skills to Advance team and throughout our network of over 2,000 employees, as we previously mentioned, and also with all of our learners, a massive support, an educator himself, and a superman for the ideas and getting behind them as well. So Sheila, I would love to introduce you to Peter Egan. Hello, Peter, and you're very welcome.
Hello, Sheila, and hello, Orla, and thanks for bringing me in. I feel like an imposter right now, so that's the first thing that I say, because I'm from the other side of the equation. But really delighted to be here. Been listening with great intent with the massive range of topics that we've covered over the last just under 2 hours, and it's really fascinating to hear those perspectives from yourself, Sheila, Louise, and Siobhan, and really inspiring stuff. And it's very important that we hear women's voices in this way. I think it's really critical. I think that's what International Women's Day is all about. So really delighted to be here. I don't know what much to add, but because there's just been so much really positive information, but delighted to be here.
Well, can I just add, Peter, on behalf of ourselves in MSLETB, I'd just like to say thanks for allowing us to host and participate in a platform that allows open discussion, that invites so many of our colleagues, both male and female, on board, because I can see the names popping up here from MSLETB too. And that's, it's incredibly supportive. These topics are not always easy to talk about. Sometimes it'd be easier to sit around with our own group of friends. But if anything comes out of this, that our colleagues, be it outside of MSLETB, people in business, or, from whatever aspect of life you're coming from, that you bring this discussion and anything that you've learned here today. And our whole focus within MSLETB is education and learners to the forefront. I'm one of those learners today, and I've had an amazing time. I wish I could sit here all day chatting to you all. And Peter, on behalf of us all, thank you very much.
Can I say a few things though? It's not like me, not to come in and talk about something not controversial. I do think this is an important event, this International Women's Day, and I think the theme this year is it invest in women, accelerate progress. And I think firstly, the first thing I'd like to say is that's really in line, and I think our speakers here, Louise and Sheila and Siobhan, have sort of captured that. And actually, our role, our remit in the ETB is about providing transformative education that reaches out, and we have a really important because maybe societal norms in the past have meant particularly women have been maybe pushed distance to society and economy. So in that, we've always taken our role in the ETB and that very seriously, and it's important that we'll continue to do that. I think that's the first thing, and I just and really listening to you there, I thought that was very important. My own experience before I came into the ETB, I would have worked abroad. I would have worked in Eastern Europe and Turkey, and so any places where there was a lot of timber. Actually, it's a long story, but I won't get into that. But there were generally rural places on the periphery of those societies, and even I worked in Mississippi in the United States, and I seen firsthand the inequality towards women. And in all of those societies that I've seen, that there's a direct correlation, visible correlation between that and poverty. And I think there's an onus on us, within the Western society to make sure that we level up for women in society by providing every opportunity, and be proactive in that, to try to make sure we go beyond to level up. I think that's critical. The other thing I just want to say, it was a very important point, and myself and Orla had a very long conversation about this one day there in the recent past about the menopause. I think it's something that men particularly are not, it's not something that we talk about when we're in the pub watching Liverpool or Manchester United, or we definitely don't talk about the menopause, and I think Orla told me about that. And I think that's another, thing that we might need to talk about. But I do think that the government is has issued a number of policies around that, sort of putting the onus on employers to become much more aware of this and that the impacts that this is having on women. And I think you mentioned that earlier again, and I think that's an important thing. And Orla, I think we're definitely going to follow up on that from an ETB perspective. But anybody that's not from the ETB that's on the call, we're hoping to maybe develop some courses, etc., just to provide some clarity on that. So I think that was a really important message. And then finally, so I was thinking here about the event today, and there was a very famous book written about, was it 16 or 20 years ago, called Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus. And I remember reading that book. I think it was from an Arthur Gray, I think it was. And actually, in the whole premise of the book was that men are different, and they come from Mars, and women are from Venus, and they come from somewhere else. But there's been a lot that sparked a lot of sort of scientific debate, and there was a lot of peer reviewed, and a lot of that debate actually said, well, just trying, did men actually come from Mars, and did women actually come from Venus? And actually, what they found was, no, we're all from Earth, and we have the same traits, we have the same there's same type of personalities. We're all different as individuals, and there isn't any, I think the word was taxonomic difference or distinction between men and women. There's not a meaningful one. So science has actually proved that we actually are equal from a gender perspective. So I just want to sort of, you can't argue against science, so I want to leave it there. But it's been really delight listening to you, and I think it's opened up a lot of neural pathways in my own head, and I really appreciate the great work. And I want to thank yourself, Orla. I want to thank Shannon and everybody in the team, Sligo Training Centre, just put this event on, and your team, and of course Louise for fantastic words. Denise, who couldn't be here, and then Síle, and very, very inspiring stuff. So thank you. I'm going to say no more.
Thank you, Gurmagut, Peter, and thank you, ladies. Like, I could sit on here all day, but I'm going to offer on Focal Dernachamak the last word. I'm going to start with you, Louise. One line of advice for all of our attendees today.
Talk about putting me on the spot, Orla. No.
Well, I like to do that. I like to do that.
I suppose self-care, look after yourself, and be kind to yourself, and watch the inner voice.
That's something we all need on a daily basis. Siobhan, our education guru.
What would I think? I think don't be afraid to fail. If something doesn't go right for you, if you don't get the job, if you don't get, if something goes wrong, take all those learnings and use it to your advantage for when you go forward, So, yeah, take all those learning and learn. Continuous learning is really important as well. And also surround yourself with good people. Surround yourself with positive people, it's really good. Good for the head.
Important. And we're very blessed in our organisation to be able to pick up the phone, engage with each other, and sort out all the troubles of the world. And as Peter mentioned there earlier, huge thanks to the Skills to Advance team, who are the backbone of everything I do every day, and we all try and work very, very closely together. So Sarah and Aidan and Michelle Gillen, who has been so involved with bringing everything to the forefront over the last couple of weeks, especially with these seminars and the women's events. Finally, Síle, August, last but not least, and I wish Grev definitely smoking Lerting Gaeilge as we did in the past. But Síle, I just want to say on behalf of MSLHB2, thank you so much. Like, we could just do another couple of hours of this. I don't believe we're finished, and I think Peter has given us the official okay to open this up more regularly there, and certainly to discuss topics that involve not only the ladies, but men as well, and we're all unlearning and relearning again. But Síle, What would you like to sign off on as your final thought to all our attendees today?
I suppose really it's never too late. If you're watching and you feel like you're maybe stuck in a rut for whatever reason, or things aren't happening the way you thought they might, that really to let go of timelines. When you're in a difficult situation, it can be all that you can see, and I appreciate that. So sometimes you need to honor wherever you're at in your life. There's a time for wallowing. There's also a time for activation and make change and do something different. But you can only do that depending on where you're at yourself. So everything has the capacity to change. Things are always in motion and moving. Last Friday I was emceeing a health awards for staff in the Blackrock health organization. So the Blackrock Clinic, the Hermitage, Galway Clinic, and Limerick. And I spoke about the time I was in for my cancer treatment. I was in isolation for a week having this radioactive iodine treatment in the Blackrock Clinic. And the staff were brilliant. They couldn't come into the room to me. My food was handed in on paper plates through a hatch in the wall, but they used to ring me and they used to talk to me, through the glass. They were lovely. And I basically spoke about my experience at the beginning. And then I introduced one of the main people there. And he said, thank you for sharing that. I actually designed the room that you were in, and you were one of the very few first patients in that room. And I had this moment of, wow, if somebody had shown me 12 and a half years ago when I was in that room going through cancer treatment, that 12 and a half years later, you'll be emceeing the staff awards and you'll actually introduce the guy who designed the room you're in, it would have blown my mind. So just to remind yourself that everything can change, and things don't necessarily have a linear path. Like I became a mother later in life. I was 37 and 42 having my kids. I've worked on my best work in the last few years, and I'm 26 years in the industry. You can be late bloomers, everything has a time and a place. And if you feel like you haven't peaked yet, maybe that's exactly what it is. Your peak is yet to come. So go easy on yourself. It's never too late to make change.
With that in mind, I wish everybody every success in their peak coming along, and never, certainly I see so many women across the board who doubt themselves, and me included, on a daily basis. But look, we're all here to champion each other. I hope that everybody's enjoyed everything that we've had on offer today, and the discussion and the open discussion, but let's more importantly keep it going. Anybody that I ever run into, if you know me, I'm well up for a chat at any stage. Certainly Louise, Siobhan also, and Peter. Like, all we can do is our best on a daily basis, and we've started the ball rolling now, and we will keep it rolling, and I promise you that. Thank you so much to everyone that stayed online with us for this length of time. Like, you can never predict how long an event like this will run for, but look, I have to say I'm humbled to be in everybody's company. Siobhan, you've got your love, Seuss.
My love is Seuss. I also wanted to just say thanks to you, Orla, and also Shannon in the background, because in fairness, you made us feel very comfortable, Orla. I'm certainly not, I'm not like Síle Seoige there now, and Louise that'd be out and about all the time, but you made us feel very, welcome and very at ease, Orla. So thanks a million. And also to the dynamite woman that is Shannon Cassells, who keeps us all on our toes when it comes to all things communications. And I know you say the same about Orla Gillen, or Michelle in the background, Michelle Gillen in the background. So thanks very much, everybody.
Gurmila Mahagwib, and I look forward to welcoming everybody back on screen in the not too distant future. Gurmagwib agus slán go fóill.
Thanks a million.
Gurmila.